Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk to you today about the issue of the feminised education system and generally female entitlement. We're anti-feminists and we come to Speaker's Corner to talk about these issues.
You're anti-feminist?
That's right, yeah. So I'd like to go through the life cycle of a young boy who grows up in Britain today. So the young boy is born and he starts to, he becomes a toddler in this system, and what's the first intervention we see from a lot of feminists? Well, I mean, in a number of newspaper articles we see various feminists saying that, oh God, I wish I could have a girl instead of a boy, I'd feel so, horrified if I had a boy. Okay, this isn't most women, obviously not, but it exists, it's put out in the media, and this is considered somehow acceptable, and I don't really get how it's considered acceptable. At this stage we're seeing a clear divide in the way the two genders differ in how they play. But the feminists are against all of this. What they say that gender is entirely a social construction. It's all in our minds. It's just something that we've all just made up. And they're saying that the only reason why there's any difference between men and women later in life is because of the way we're socialised. We think that's generally a lot of rubbish, and the science shows it's absolute rubbish. The science shows that even infants who are a day old, when you have a male baby, an infant, a day old, he will, when given the choice whether to focus on faces or whether to focus on various trains, other sort of types of usually toy vehicles, he'll focus on the vehicles, whereas a female child, a day old, will focus on faces. So even at this stage we start to see a difference between the two genders emerging. Okay, so the children then get to school and they start playing in the school playground, and at this point I think we're seeing a number of very negative sort of feminist narratives come into the fore in trying to create a sort of androgynous playground atmosphere. One of the things they're bringing in now in the UK is they're trying to have in primary school girl gender champions. So they're not actually getting boy gender champions, they're only getting girl gender champions, and it's the job of these gender champions to go around policing playground behaviour. So if they hear things like any comments to do with shut up gay, or you're a fatty, or stop being bossy, sort of a lot of these kind of stereotypical comments that children will make regarding gender or regarding sexuality. These girl gender champions are then allowed to inform the teacher, who will be a kind of overarching gender champion, and what they'll do is they'll then put the offending boy or girl on detention. And so you see this effort by the mainstream feminists to create a division within the primary school system, and I think this is it's fairly bizarre. It's a little worrying. I think whenever any political system becomes interested in trying to change the way that children at primary school level think, then it's you need to start worrying about that. I forget the Greek philosopher, it may have been Aristotle, I'm not sure on this, it was one of them. He said that give me the child until the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. And you know, we're seeing that now with the mainstream feminists and the way they're morphing the education system at primary school level. In the USA, there was a recent one, and this was boys of about 8, 9 years old, and it was in schools in the USA. And what they were doing was they were asking the mums or the dads to put them in a dress for a day, you know, and they'd send the boys into school wearing a dress. And, you know, they said, oh, it was to make them consider what it was like to be the other gender. I mean, they never did this for the girls who went to this school. They only targeted the boys. They said it was to make them consider what it would be like being the other gender. I think this was an exercise in humiliation, to be fair. Another thing they're telling boys of primary school level now, they're telling them about the patriarchy. So they're saying, you know, this tired feminist narrative of throughout history, men have always oppressed women. You know, it's just because they're evil bastards. You know, they always beat up women whenever they had the opportunity. They're just horrible shits, basically, and that's what they'll do if they're allowed to have their way. And so they all sort of, you know, they've been integrating this into various history classes at primary school level. And I mean, you know, I don't think this is a good thing. I think it was Doris Lesson. She went into primary school and saw one of these lessons where boys were being educated about the patriarchy, and she said that she saw you know, all of the boys in the class were sitting there kind of feeling really bad about themselves, and you're thinking, Jesus Christ, are we honestly this awful? And whereas the girls were sitting there smug, content, and she said that this you know, looked as though it was going to be the pattern for which the rest of their lives would adhere to. So that's kind of the primary school level. Another thing we see there is we have, in terms of the teacher divide, I believe it's 84% of the teachers at primary school level are female, 16% male. So is this, you know, and also the main kind of I guess the main kind of, you know, ideology they're all being educated into, the teachers, is that of the patriarchy ideology, and that of another further ideology which states that, oh well, we need more women to go into science, technology, engineering and mathematics. There's no inverse of this. There's no attempt to increase the number of guys who are going into, for instance, subjects like education or nursing or doctors, where now we see, I think in medicine it's 67% of doctors are female. So there's no attempt, there is an attempt to increase the number of girls going into STEM subjects, and I believe every year they spend around 30 million on encouraging girls to go into these subjects, but there's no attempt to increase the number of boys going into you know, some of the more traditionally female subjects. Also, another thing we see is that with grading at primary school level, in a lot of the tests that boys do, what we see is there is a gender bias, and that the female teachers will mark the boys down on the basis of their gender, whereas they won't, they'll actually increase the girls' marks on the basis of their gender. And they've done this as a double-blind trial, so they had the same group of students. The teachers didn't actually know the students, they were primary school level kids, but and it was the same tests, and one group of teachers, they marked the children's tests, but they didn't see the name of the children. The other group of teachers marked the children's tests, but they did see the names of the children. And when they saw the names of the children, they found that they increased the girls' marks and decreased the boys' marks. This is something we see again in secondary school level. You know, all the way through a lot of the coursework which has now become prevalent in secondary school education. Back in the 60s and 70s, the trend was that boys were outperforming girls in secondary school education. That trend has now changed, and girls are now outperforming the boys. And I'm saying maybe two of the major reasons for this are that they've generally taken away single-sex education, except for the most high-paid sort of private schools that you can go to. Those schools still have single-sex education. I believe one of the reasons for this is that in single-sex education you actually get extremely high marks for both boys and girls, and so that's why they have it in the sort of private schools where you have to pay a lot of money to go to. Another thing I believe that has led to girls doing better than boys at secondary school level is coursework, and sort of a lot of this coursework at that level, the teacher will see the pupil's name on the sheet of paper, and at secondary school level what we see is again around 60% of the teachers are female and around 40% are male, and so there is a sort of in-group bias amongst women to mark girls up.
What you're saying is probably true, but the thing is my relatives are mostly Chinese, and they don't take any notice of this because the Chinese are not going to take any notice of any of these things. They're going to go out for the best education for their children.
Yes, yeah.
Right, and it's going to be the parents and the family background of the Chinese is pushing education. So they can overcome that. They can overcome that. But what it is, the white working class probably can't overcome it.
Right,
doesn't it? My family, the Chinese are not affected by any of
the Chinese have generally turned their back on feminism as an ideology as well.
They just go for the best.
They're just looking at economics and what increases their own economic power as a country, and that's how they're looking at the whole situation. We're slightly different. So when we get to university, we're generally again seeing a 60% of graduates from university are now female, around 40% are male. In some ways, I think this is unfortunate because in some subjects, like after people graduate from university, say take medicine for instance, in that one we're seeing the near 70% of graduates are female. One of the major problems that's happening there is that a lot of the female graduates are working till they're around 35. They're then finishing full-time work. To have kids, to raise a family, they also have a rich husband, a lot of these medicine graduates, and so they don't need to work, and they'd rather take time off to have a family. And so you're kind of, I mean, is that a bit of a waste of money? You know, the fact that you've spent that much on educating a new doctor, and they're now at the age of 35, they're just going to take loads of time off work in order to have a family. So this is one of the problems we're seeing due to our feminised education system. I mean, again, at university, there's this massive push to have more women in science, technology, engineering and maths.
I'm a doctor, I don't have any children.
Okay, I mean, possibly not having kids is also a problem if the human race wants to continue.
I don't think my not having children is going to threaten the human race.
I mean, it might threaten the culture around you. If our culture dies, we'll be assimilated by a stronger culture.
We'll become Muslim if people are like
Just one person like me not having children. I'm infertile, I can't have any babies.
Okay, I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I suppose that makes it a bit different.
I've got turners.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so we see with engineering, for instance, one of the things they do in the engineering courses. They offer, I believe it's a £20,000 bursary. Brunel University offer this to female engineering students to do the course, and they don't offer the male students the same bursary because they want more female engineers. I don't really understand why they want more female engineers.
Because the people that advocate that in the academia, they get paid a good pension and a good salary for being politically correct. And if they weren't politically correct, they wouldn't get the promotion and they wouldn't get the bloody big pension when they retire.
I mean, generally,
it'd be like me. I wasn't politically correct. I was supposed to be a manager in Europe Council, and I said 9/11 was an inside job, and that was it.
Okay, right.
Go on.
So with these, so with engineering generally, I mean, is there any benefit to having female engineers? I'm not so sure. Or is there any benefit to having female IT workers? I'm not so sure. I think what you need is people who actually want to do these jobs. People who are willing to put up with the actual job, which a lot of the time will be kind of technical, kind of boring. A lot of women don't want to do this. A lot will want to do jobs that kind of have more of a human connection. So I guess we see with medicine that would be one of them. Say veterinary sciences as well. That's obviously you're working with animals a lot more. So that's sort of the desire a lot of women have to work in those jobs. Whereas the more technical jobs, guys kind of prefer that environment because I think there's a major genetic component there. Like guys, on the whole, prefer working with sort of abstract kind of systems, whereas women generally prefer working with humans and basically living creatures.
I mean, women can be rational, they can do calculus.
Calculus is not legal.
They can do it, I'm not sure so many want to.
Surely it's variable, just like a kind of distribution of IQ. You get some women who are talented and are gifted philosophers. They might have studied Aristotle. They'd be good at positional calculus, for example.
Do you think there would be any point in spending 30 million every year to have more male nurses?
Well, then argument, if you want to kind of make a schism or distinction between males and females, it has to be a female with a very ability.
Yes,
Now you've got, I don't know if it's an equal distribution, but you certainly have a lot of men going.
I mean, personally, I don't really, I find this is all a bit divisive, saying that, we need to encourage more of this gender into this subject, or this gender into that subject, and it's like, well, why don't you just rely on whoever wants to go into these subjects rather than actually spending money. And a lot of this is a waste of money as well, because with encouraging women into engineering, it doesn't actually work that well, and I figure a lot of that money could be spent far better.
What about Ada Lovelace? I mean, she was a brilliant mathematician. She was a female.
I think she would be an outlier, and you do get them, and that happens. And okay, so moving away from that, sort of generally the women in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. If we look at a lot of the other jobs, some of them university jobs, others more of the kind of the skilled trades. What we see, which I believe is quite a worrying trend, is so I'll take the fire service for instance. What we're seeing in the fire service now is that they're saying, okay, we need more female firefighters, and so but then they find that a lot of women who try to become firefighters are failing the physical test. So how do they encourage more women to become firefighters even though they're failing the physical test? Well, they decrease the basically they make the test easier. And is this a good thing? I don't believe it is, because you lower the sort of physical standards needed for someone to join the fire service. You then have, say, a female fire service in the field, goes into a house, a burning building, has to rescue a 16-stone man from the second floor. The fact that they've decreased the physical test, the physical requirements, that's going to end badly. It also puts pressure on, I guess, a lot of the old school style male firemen who are able to achieve these physical standards, because then they're the ones who everyone looks to in the emergency situation. They're like, oh, can you do this? Because I couldn't possibly do this. And so you get a massive de-skilling of the entire workforce, and which is only going to really result in sort of things going wrong. I mean, I see the same thing in the police service. I see a lot of, I see a lot of new female police officers, and some of them are like tiny, 5 foot nothing. I see some of them, their makeup's done up, their nails are done up, and they're there, and I'm sort of like, well, if you wanted to arrest me and I was resistive, then things would probably go my way. I'm not a hugely strong guy. I'm not vastly, I'm not like a muscle mountain or anything like that. So I kind of have this a sort of feeling that when I see a police officer, I want them to be pretty physically strong. I want them to be someone who would stand a pretty good chance, certainly against me in a fight. That's just my feeling on it. I believe it's it should be a physically demanding job, and I think it's a job that someone who wants to do should have to attain a good standard of physical capability in order to do. But with sort of the feminisation of the workplace, what we're doing is we're ignoring people's physical capability and whether they're able to do a job or not, just so we can promote women into these work environments. And I believe we see this in the police service, in the fire service, and in a bunch of other services, and the result is a sort of degeneration of the quality of that's provided by these services. Sorry? I believe the problem is a lot of women aren't actually able to physically perform a lot of these jobs.
What sort of jobs do you like?
I mentioned the police service and the fire service.
Yeah.
I believe that
They can't do anything in the police service and the fire service.
I mean, well, yeah, obviously, you talk about like you sort of talk about, say office work and stuff. I believe they can do that. But when you're talking about
negotiating or calming people down,
I believe they're good at de-escalation, yes. However, I don't believe they're good at if the sorry to swear, but if the shit hits the fan, I just don't believe they're particularly useful in that situation. And if we look at the
Do you want your police to just go around battering people, or do you want them to actually make a positive difference in the community? If they're meant to be representing the people that are there,
well,
then
if the shit hits the fan, then de-escalation goes out the window anyway. No, you can't de-escalate someone if they're attacking you.
about what sort of shit are hitting the fan?
Well, if you've got a riot on your hands, if you've got a mad criminal who's out of control, you need to take them down.
That you can de-escalate.
To be honest,
I've seen somebody do that. I'm not a police officer myself, but my neighbour is.
Yeah.
I've seen her do that. And she's
Right.
very, very good at it. Obviously,
I mean-
the physical stress
Yeah.
to maybe overpower somebody.
Yeah.
Like, I probably couldn't overpower you. But could you climb a mountain and do 80 miles on your bike? That's actually couldn't.
No.
I have the physical stature and strength to do that, and I
Sure.
can prove it to you.
Yeah.
So
I mean, okay. Can I just get back onto? Well, So what I'm saying is that I think with sort of with general physical exercise capability, I think that's fairly well distributed, and women are able to attain a high standard of endurance. However, in terms of physical strength, I think it's far less women who are able to attain a high level of physical strength compared to men. On average, men are 20% heavier than women, and most of that extra weight goes into muscle mass or into bone density. Women, on the other hand, a lot more of that weight goes into fatty deposits such as breasts and bums and that sort of thing. And the reason why that extra weight goes into that's not rubbish. That is scientific fact. That is. Are you kidding? Are you saying, seriously, are you saying that men do not have more bone density and muscle mass, and women, their weight goes into fatty deposits? That is 100% scientific truth.
We think that new technology society, technology matters more than weight.
Well, technology doesn't matter if you're a policeman and you've got a mad loony who's on the rampage and they're trying to deck you. Technology, the new technology society doesn't matter so much then. You still need some of the old skills in that situation. Yeah. I'm trying to point out the bleeding obvious. I'm trying to point out that physical capability is important in some jobs.
Why are you up there making a point?
Yeah.
Women and men can't do
are different.
Yeah, but they are different.
Yeah.
Why are you saying that women can't do something? Why are you up there?
Okay, well, because I'm sort of saying that for the history of the human race, men have taken on the protector-provider role, and so, in hunter-gatherer societies, we went out into the field or the savannah, tracked down the lion, speared, the lion, did a lot of the long-distance foraging work, that sort of thing. Women were more, they were involved in giving birth to the next generation. Sorry?
This is Sunday.
Okay, so I'm saying that evolutionary history led to a difference in the physiology of men and women, and also into a different sexual division of labour. And so that is why we have different skills, basically. And men's skill for most of history has been as the protector, provider for the tribe. Women's skill has been as a caregiver, nurturer to the next generation. And I think it's important to remember this because, this sexual division of labour, actually, when we actually incorporate it, I believe it creates a mutual dependency between men and women that benefits both of them. We can, obviously, to an extent, we do live in a new technology society, so some of this is different now. But a lot of those skills that we needed to perform back then, we still need to perform today. Women still need to give birth to the next generation, and they're still far better at providing care and nurturing to young toddlers, to babies, and to young children. Men, on the other hand, are far better in a dangerous situation. They're far better if you're a police officer and you've got a mad loony who you need to restrain. They're better in, say, a fireman situation, and you've got a 16-stone man you need to get out of a second floor building. They're way better in that situation. One of the Girl Writes What, a YouTube blogger and anti-feminist, she recently spoke about, it was a story, and it was, she was saying she was at a train station, and suddenly one of the men on the platform, who was quite drunk, fell down onto the train tracks, and some of the women nearby, they saw, basically a train started coming in, And so some of the women nearby, they started trying to get the attention of the train driver to slow the train down.
Hello?
Now 2 of the men, they jumped down onto the tracks and they rescued the guy who had fallen down. In another situation, I saw this on a BBC documentary, and there was a woman who had gone with her baby, and it was a pram, and she was walking it along a pier, and it was somewhere in England, and basically, she left the pram unattended. It was kind of stupid. She didn't actually put the brakes on the wheels, and a gust of wind blew the baby and the pram into the sea. Now, did she jump into the water after the baby? No, it was a nearby man who did. So what we see here is it's called male disposability. And what will happen, what we see right through our genetic history, is that men will risk their lives in order to save women and children, because they are the protectors and providers for the race. Women will not risk their lives generally in that situation. The reason why women won't risk their lives in that situation is because they are the caregivers and nurturers to the next generation. So if a woman dies in that situation, then you've got a baby maker who's taken out of the equation. And so for her and for the race generally, it's better if she basically remains alive, and if, say, the toddler dies, or if the man rescuing the toddler dies. But for the man, obviously, if he's able to save the toddler's life, then that's more people who are in the tribe. And so this is why you see this sort of emphasis on male disposability. So that's sort of why you see that. And I believe that's why it's important in the workplace and in the education system that you promote. I'd say that we sort of actually look at the capability of people, the physical capability of people to perform certain jobs, and that we don't have this feminist ideal of trying to increase the number of women in every single job, because I think a lot of the time that just leads to chaos, and it leads to a de-skilled workforce. So that's sort of why I'm promoting this idea. Any questions on that? Okay, yeah, cheers.